Number Chapter 0. The bass drum hit Lena's chest, a physical throb mirroring the insistent pulse behind her eyes. Confetti, glittering like captured rainbows, rained down, sticking in her short, dark hair. Trumpets blared, a joyous, brassy assault. And the air hung thick with the scent of sugar, fried dough, and something wilder, something ancient, and almost floral. Mobile, Alabama, was embracing its second weekend of Mardi Gras, and the North Mobile County Parade was in full swing. She focused on the viewfinder, framing a shot of a float depicting a mythical sea serpent, scales shimmering with 1,000 sequins. "Gorgeous, right?" she murmured into her voice recorder, forcing a brightness she didn't quite feel. The theme this year is myths and legends, honestly. It is a photographer's dream. It was also a test. Every bead thrown, every smiling face, every intoxicating smell was a tiny tremor in the foundations she painstakingly rebuilt. 312 days. 312 days since she last tasted anything stronger than black coffee. She tightened her grip on the camera. Her knuckles white, this assignment's small-time local color for the Tinny Mobile Register, was a gift. A chance to prove she could handle something. Anything without the comforting haze of whiskey. It was also a punishment, a step down from investigative pieces, a pointed reminder. She adjusted the lens, capturing a blur of children reaching for throws. A craving, sharp and sudden, sliced through her. Not for the booze itself, not anymore. For the bouquet torn, the muffling. The oblivion, she swallowed hard, the lump in her throat burning. Focus. "Lena," she breathed. The words a silent command. A woman in a purple and gold feathered headdress stopped in front of her, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You catchin' all the magic, darlin'." Lena managed to smile, trying to. "It is overwhelming." The woman laughed, a throaty rumble. "It is supposed to be best to just let it wash over you." She tossed Lena a strand of beads. "Welcome to Mardi Gras." "Thank you." The woman moved on, swallowed by the crowd. Lena continued to shoot, methodically, professionally. It was during a lull, while downloading photos to her laptop at a makeshift table in the back of a local diner, that she heard the whispers. At first, it was just fragments. DuBois girl disappeared. Last night, she overheard more as she sipped lukewarm coffee. Evangeline DuBois, 22 years old. Daughter of Armand DuBois, one of Mobile's oldest and wealthiest families. Last seen at a masked ball downtown. No note, no witnesses. Lena's reporter's instincts, dormant for too long, flickered to life. She pulled up the Far Register study website, searching for a story. Nothing. She found old news articles about the DuBois family, however. Generational wealth built on shipbuilding and a reputation for quiet philanthropy. And a few whispers of old money eccentricity. Armand DuBois was a civic leader, a patron of the arts, a man who wielded influence with a velvet glove. News articles about Evangeline painted a picture of a bright, promising young woman, recently graduated from Tulane, set to join the family business. She flagged the information and walked back into the parade route, seeking out a police presence. She found Officer Ray Jenkins, a beat cop she recognized from previous assignments. Directing traffic. "Ray, you heard anything about a missing person?" "A DuBois girl," Jenkins sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Evangeline? Yeah. Heard something. Family-s keeping it quiet, naturally. Don't he want it affecting the celebrations. They re-saying she probably just ran off with a boy. A 22-year-old heiress runs off without a word during Mardi Gras." Lena raised an eyebrow. Jenkins shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about his cynicism. "Happens more than you think. Rich kids wanting to rebel, experiment. It is a classic. Has a report been filed?" "Yeah, but the captain's thinking it is a waste of resources. Said we've got enough to handle with the crowds." Lena felt a familiar frustration building. The story didn't feel like a runaway. There was something off back at the Foodie Register. The newsroom buzzed with post-parade activity. Lena found her editor, Harold Boggs, hunched over his desk, a mountain of papers threatening to engulf him. Harold was a relic, a grizzled veteran who'd seen it all And wasn't he easily impressed or moved? Boggs, he barely glanced up. Lena, picture's good. They refine. I also heard about Evangeline DuBois, the disappearance. Harold finally looked up, his eyes faded blue and perpetually tired, narrowing. The DuBois girl. Yeah, heard about it. Family wants it kept quiet, which means no story. But no buts. It is a runaway. Rich girl bored, looking for attention, happens all the time. We re a news organization, not a gossip rag. He returned to his papers, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. But what if it is not? Lena persisted, the urgency tightening her voice. Harold sighed, a long, suffering sound. Lena, I gave you a chance. A small assignment. Something to unsafe for. You messed up last time. You jumped to conclusions, ran with a half-baked story, and nearly ruined your career. The words were like a punch to the gut. She flinched, the memory of the debacle resurfacing with painful clarity. Sucker, the office of Councilman Richard Abernathy had been firebombed. A politically motivated act. The police claimed, Lena then, a rising star, had been convinced it was connected to a land development deal. Abernathy was pushing a deal that would displace a historically black community. She pushed the story, meticulously building a case, despite warnings from Harold. Then it all unraveled. The evidence she relied on was circumstantial manipulated. A key witness recanted. It turned out the arsonist was a disgruntled former employee of Abernathy with no connection to the land deal. The Forderster had been forced to issue a retraction. Lena had been publicly humiliated, her credibility shattered. She spiraled, finding solace in the numbing embrace of alcohol. The bottle had been her truth serum, her confidante, her escape. It had also been her undoing. She lost her apartment, her friends. Her self-respect. It took a brutal intervention from her sister, Sarah, and a stint in rehab to pull herself back from the brink. While Lena closed her eyes, battling the wave of shame. I was wrong, Boggs, I admit it. But this feels different. Feels different. Harold scoffed. That is what you always say, Lena. You have a knack for letting your instincts run wild. And it always ends badly. He paused, his voice softening slightly. Look, I want you to succeed, but you need to learn patience. You need to stick to the facts. And right now, the facts say this is a runaway case. He budge. Lena knew she wouldn't win. He'd given her a lifeline, and she wasn't about to jeopardize it by going rogue. Not again, defeated. She returned to her desk, but the story refused to let go. She pulled up the DuBois family history again, digging deeper. A local historical society website mentioned Armand DuBois. His great-grandfather, Jean-Luc DuBois, had been a founding member of several prominent Mardi Gras crews. Then, buried in the digital archives, a single intriguing phrase caught her eye. The crew of the Black Dawn. The description was sparse, almost non-existent. A secretive society formed in the late 19th century known for its elaborate masked balls and unorthodox traditions. The crew had apparently disbanded decades ago, shrouded in rumor and speculation. Some whispered it was dissolved due to internal conflicts, others that it had simply faded away. There were whispers of dark rituals, of debts owed to unseen powers. She cross-referenced the crew's name with local police records, old news articles, anything she could find. Nothing substantial. It was as if the crew of the Black Dawn had been deliberately erased from history. As she dug, she stumbled across a photograph of a masked ball from 1923, showcasing crew members in elaborate Gothic-inspired costumes. One mask in particular caught her eye. It was ornate, wrought from black and silver, shaped like a raven-esque skull, with crimson jewels for eyes. The image flickered on her screen. A cold dread settled in her stomach. Later that evening, Officer Jenkins called. Lena, you were asking about the DuBois girl. We found something near where she was last seen. Thought you might want to take a look. He sent her a photograph from his phone. Pushed into focus by the flash was a discarded object, lying in the damp grass near the wrought iron gates of the abandoned Beaumont mansion. It was a mask, a black and silver raven skull, with crimson jewel eyes, identical to the one in the 1923 photograph. The Beaumont mansion loomed against the pre-dawn sky, a skeletal silhouette of decaying grandeur. Its wrought iron gates, twisted and rusted, stood ajar, an invitation to trespass. Rain slicked the cobblestones. Mirroring the gray, oppressive sky, Lena shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. It wasn't just the damp chill. There was a weight in the air, a sense of something old and wrong. Officer Jenkins was already there, taping off a small section of the lawn where the mask had been found. He looked grim, pretty strange, huh? Lena knelt, carefully examining the ground. The grass was disturbed, as if someone had been standing there for a while. The mask itself was chillingly beautiful, the silver tarnished, the crimson jewels glinting like drops of blood. "Where exactly did you find it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jenkins pointed, about 10 feet from the gate, laying face up, as if someone wanted it to be found, and nothing else. No footprints, no other clues. Not much. The area's been trampled by kids over the years. It is a popular spot for teenagers cutting class and stuff. He paused, then added, "But this doesn't feel like some kid's prank." Lena didn't either. This felt deliberate, a message. She photographed the mask from every angle, the ornate details sending a prickle of unease down her spine. She could shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something far bigger, far darker than a simple missing person case. The next 12 hours were a blur of research. Back at the precinct register, Lena lost herself in the archives, sifting through microfiche and digital records. The crew of the Black Dawn proved to be a phantom, a whispered legend. Initial records pointed to its founding in the 1880s, during a period of social upheaval and economic disparity in Mobile. It was described as an exclusive society, comprised of the city's wealthiest and most influential families. What it did beyond host elaborate masked balls was shrouded in mystery. Some accounts hinted at philanthropic endeavors, funding local charities and supporting the arts. Others whispered of secret meetings, occult practices, and a ruthless pursuit of power. There were mentions of inherited obligations and ancient agreements. The language was deliberately vague, laced with coded symbolism. The Krew's symbol, the raven skull, appeared frequently in early records, etched into invitations, emblazoned on banners, displayed on family crests. It was a symbol of death, prophecy, and hidden knowledge. A chilling emblem. One fragmented newspaper clipping from 1902 mentioned a scandal involving a crew member accused of blackmail and extortion. The story was quickly suppressed, the man exonerated, and the newspaper forced to issue a retraction. The incident was dismissed as a smear campaign orchestrated by a rival political faction. Lena sensed a pattern. Every time the crew surfaced, someone or something stepped in to silence the noise. She knew she needed to talk to the DuBois family. The DuBois mansion was a formidable structure, set back from the street behind a towering hedge. It exuded an air of old money and impenetrable privacy. A stern-faced butler answered the door, his expression carefully neutral. "I am Lena Moreau with the 30 Mobile Register 2Y. I'd like to speak with Mr. DuBois about his daughter." "Evangeline." The butler's eyes narrowed. "Mr. DuBois is unavailable. He is understandably distressed by his daughter's disappearance. He has no comment to make at this time. I understand his grief, but this is a matter of public interest. Evangeline is a prominent member of this community. Mr. DuBois has stated his position. He will not be speaking to the press." Lena refused to be dismissed. "Perhaps I could speak with Mrs. DuBois or a sibling." The butler hesitated, then said, "Very well, one moment." He led her into a formal drawing room, opulent but strangely sterile. Armand DuBois' wife Eleanor entered shortly after. She was a strikingly beautiful woman, even in her grief, but her eyes were guarded, her expression icy. "Miss Moreau," she said, her voice clipped and controlled. "What is it you want?" Lena explained that she was simply gathering information for a news story. She asked about Evangeline, about her life, her friends, her recent activities. Eleanor answered politely, but her responses were carefully measured, revealing nothing of substance. Evangeline was a bright, vibrant young woman, she said. She had a promising future. We read devastated by her disappearance. Did she have any enemies? Was she involved in anything unusual? Eleanor's eyes flashed with annoyance. That is an outrageous question. Evangeline was a good person. She had no enemies. Was she interested in local history, specifically the early history of Mobile? Lena asked, carefully phrasing the question. Eleanor's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. She enjoyed reading, yes, like most young women her age. Did she ever mention the crew of the Black Dawn? Lena pressed, watching for a reaction. The color drained from Eleanor's face. She stiffened, her hand trembling. I don't too know what you are talking about. It was a prominent society in the 19th century. Some of the founding members were DuBois family ancestors. Eleanor stood up abruptly. I think you've asked enough questions. Miss Moreau, I need to be alone. She dismissed Lena with a curt nod, leaving her feeling frustrated and increasingly suspicious. The DuBois family was hiding something. She was certain of it. As she left the mansion, a man emerged from the shadows, blocking her path. He was tall, imposing. With a steely gaze, he didn't introduce himself. You are digging where you shouldn't be, Miss Moreau, he said, his voice a low growl. Some things are best left forgotten. Is that a threat? Lena asked. Meeting his gaze, he didn't answer, but his silence was more than enough. He simply stood there, a silent warning, until Lena turned and walked away. The veiled threats followed her as she ventured into the historic districts of Mobile. Shopkeepers clammed up when she asked about the crew. Locals cast suspicious glances. A sense of unease hung in the air, as if she were being watched. An old woman selling pralines in Bienville Square hissed, Leave it alone, child. Some memories are best left buried. But Lena could let it go. She returned to the register and discovered Evangeline had been a frequent visitor to the Mobile Public Library's historical archives. She spoke to the librarian, a kindly woman named Mrs. Gable, who remembered Evangeline well. She was a lovely girl, very inquisitive. Mrs. Gable said she was researching the early history of the city, focusing on the Mardi Gras cruise. She was particularly interested in the crew of the Black Dawn. Did she say why? She didn't go into detail, but she seemed obsessed with it. She spent hours poring over old records, newspaper clippings, anything she could find. She said she felt a connection to it. Mrs. Gable handed Lena a stack of research notes Evangeline had left at the library. They were meticulously organized, filled with handwritten annotations and sketches. The last entry was dated the day before Evangeline disappeared. They're rewatching me, it read. I can feel their eyes on my back. I've uncovered something dangerous. The ritual is happening soon. The summoning, it has to be stopped. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible. Lena's heart pounded. Back at her apartment, Lena read Evangeline, sprawling notes. References to ancient lore and forgotten deities punctuated dry historical detail. The final pages were filled with a chaotic string of phrases: the Black Gate, the Raven's Call, the debt must be paid. She continued searching through Evangeline's notes, each page a terrifying descent into obsession, finally finding a small, leather-bound journal tucked inside a folder. It wasn't cataloged with the library's resources. It was personal. As she opened it, the scent of old paper and lavender filled her nostrils. The first entry was dated 6 months before Evangeline's disappearance. Asterisk the 12th of October. Asterisk I think I've found something incredible. Something terrifying. I've been researching my family history, tracing our lineage back to the founding of Mobile. I discovered that several of my ancestors were members of the crew of the Black Dawn. But it wasn't just a social club. It was something more. A secret society that practiced ancient rituals. Rituals involving sacrifice and something else, something dark. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She scanned the subsequent entries, her heartbeat quickening with each line. Evangeline chronicled her descent into obsession, her growing fear, her desperate attempts to understand the crew's true purpose. Asterisk the 5th of November. Asterisk 50I. V been having nightmares, visions of masked figures, chanting in a darkened room, a raven circling overhead. I see the mask, always the mask, with those cold, crimson eyes staring into my soul. Asterisk, asterisk, the 20th of December. Asterisk, why think I am being followed? I've seen the same man watching me from across the street, several times now. He always wears a dark coat and a hat that obscures his face. I can shake the feeling he is connected to the crew. Asterisk, asterisk, the 18th of January. Asterisk 1IV discovered the location of the old Black Dawn sanctuary. It is hidden beneath the Beaumont mansion. I am going to investigate. The last entry, scrawled in a shaky hand, sent a wave of icy dread through Lena. Asterisk the 21st of February. Asterisk when they know, I know. The ritual is tonight. They say it is a reawakening, a summoning. They need a sacrifice. And I think I am the chosen one. Funtuin suddenly, Lena felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She whirled around, her heart hammering, empty space. But the scent of lavender, sharp and cloying, lingered in the air, and a single black feather drifted silently to the floor. The lavender scent clung to the air like a phantom, a ghostly reminder of Evangeline's fear. Lena sat hunched over the journal, the dim light of her apartment casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The journal was a puzzle box, filled with Evangeline's rushed handwriting, fragmented thoughts, and strange, recurring symbols. Lena spent hours meticulously deciphering the shorthand, cross-referencing the symbols with occult texts and historical records. She de-downloaded. It was slow, painstaking work. But as the pieces began to fall into place, a terrifying picture emerged. The crew of the Black Dawn wasn't simply a social club. It was a cult dedicated to the worship of a pre-Columbian entity known as the Night Weaver, a being of immense power said to dwell between worlds, capable of granting wealth, influence, and immortality. But at a terrible price. Evangeline, as research revealed, the crew believed the Night Weaver had been weakened over time, its power dwindling as mobile modernized and its traditions were forgotten. The upcoming Mardi Gras, with its heightened energy and collective revelry, was the perfect time to replenish its power. The ritual, scheduled for the final night of Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, was designed, according to Evangeline, to reawaken the Weaver and restore its ancient dominion. The journal contains sketches of the ritual chamber, depicting a circular stone altar, surrounded by 13 black candles, and a central platform where a vessel would be offered. Evangeline. As notes suggested, the vessel wasn't necessarily a physical sacrifice, but rather someone with a strong lineage tied to the founding members of the crew. A blood offering to unlock the Weaver's power. Lena shivered. Evangeline DuBois, a descendant of one of the founding families, fit that description perfectly. The mask, she discovered, was more than just an emblem. According to several fragmented passages in a hand-drawn diagram, it represented the Raven Master, the highest ranking member of the crew, the one responsible for conducting the ritual and communing with the Night Weaver. The Raven Master was the conduit, the intermediary between the mortal world and the dark entity they sought to summon. Suddenly, the threatening phone call from the man outside the DuBois mansion, coupled with the unsettling presence in her apartment, made chilling sense. Someone was desperate to keep her from uncovering the truth, driven by a frantic urgency. Lena headed straight to the mobile police department. She laid out her findings for Captain Rourke, the same officer who dismissed her concerns about Evangeline's disappearance. She presented the journal, the photographs of the mask, the translated notes. Rourke listened with a skeptical expression, his gaze unwavering. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Miss Moreau, with all due respect, this is quite a story. It is the truth, Captain. Evangeline is in danger. They replanning a ritual, a sacrifice. Rourke steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. You are asking me to believe a young woman disappeared because of a centuries-old cult and a mythical entity based on a journal filled with occult ramblings. It is not just ramblings, it is research. Detailed, meticulous research. And the mask, it is real. We found it at the scene. Roke shook his head. Miss Moreau, I remember your previous incident with Councilman Abernathy. You are a talented reporter, but you have a tendency to get carried away, to see conspiracies where there are none. That was a mistake, Lena said, her voice tight. I learned from it. This is different. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I have a city to run, a parade to secure. I can't afford to chase ghost stories. I suggest you take a break, Miss Moreau. Go home, get some rest. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Lena felt a surge of frustration and despair. She was alone. No one would believe her. She had to handle this herself. As she walked out of the police station, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello, a distorted voice. Electronically altered filled her ear. You are playing a dangerous game, Miss Moreau, a game you don't understand. Who is this? Someone who appreciates the importance of keeping secrets. Let Evangeline DuBois remain lost. Forget what you've learned. Walk away for your own good. I won. Be intimidated. The voice chuckled, a chilling, hollow sound. Intimidation ends the goal. It is preservation. You continue down this path, and you find yourself wishing you never started. The line went dead. Lena stared at the phone, her hand trembling. Someone knew she was investigating. Someone was watching her. She returned to Evangeline's journal, desperate to find a clue, anything that could lead her to the Krewe and save Evangeline. She reread the entries about the ritual site, focusing on Evangeline's vague descriptions. Asterisk. An old plantation, outside of town. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss. A crumbling manor house. It has been abandoned for decades, swallowed by the swamp. They call it Blackwood Manor. Cypress trees draped historical records. Land deeds, old maps, the name rang a bell. She found an entry in a local history book describing Blackwood Manor as a sprawling plantation built in the early 1800s by Luc DuBois, the same DuBois ancestor mentioned in the Krewe's early membership rolls. The book described Blackwood Manor as the epicenter of mobile society during its heyday, a place of lavish parties and decadent excess. But after a series of mysterious deaths and financial ruin, the plantation was abandoned in the early 20th century, becoming a local legend, a haunted ruin shrouded in folklore. Lena Cross referenced the manor's location with a modern map. It was located about 30 miles outside of Mobile, deep in the swamplands west of the city, a place locals avoided. It was isolated, hidden, perfect for a secret ritual. She checked the date, Fat Tuesday. The final night of Mardi Gras was less than 12 hours away. Lena grabbed her camera bag, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had to get to Blackwood Manor. She had to find Evangeline. She had to stop the ritual, even if it meant facing the darkness alone, as she drove out of Mobile. Leaving the glittering lights of the city behind, she glanced in her rearview mirror. A pair of headlights was following her, distant but persistent. She pressed harder on the accelerator. The race against time had begun. The dirt road leading to Blackwood Manor was barely passable, choked with weeds and shadowed by ancient cypress trees draped with Spanish moss. Lena drove slowly, her headlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of decay. The closer she got, the more a primal unease settled over her. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was a place steeped in darkness, radiating a palpable sense of evil. She parked her car a quarter-mile from the manor, hidden amongst the trees, and continued on foot, moving silently through the swamp. The sound of drumming grew louder with each step, a hypnotic, rhythmic beat that resonated deep within her chest. As she neared the manor, she saw them. Figures moving amongst the decaying columns and overgrown foliage, illuminated by the flickering light of torches, dozens of them, all clad in elaborate robes of black and crimson, their faces hidden behind ornate masks. The raven skull motif was everywhere, thiritimi embroidered on their robes, etched into the torches, even painted onto their skin. The manor itself was in a state of advanced decay. The roof had partially collapsed, windows were broken, and vines climbed the crumbling walls. But despite its dilapidated condition, the courtyard was meticulously prepared. A circular stone altar dominated the center, surrounded by 13 black candles burning with an unnatural Green flame, runes were carved into the stone, glowing faintly in the torchlight. Lena cautiously circled the perimeter, careful to remain hidden in the shadows. She peered through a broken window, her breath catching in her throat. A ritual was underway. The masked figures were chanting in a guttural language she didn't recognize, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. In the center of the altar, a man was bound and gagged, his eyes wide with terror. He was Arthur Penhaligon, a local businessman who had recently spearheaded opposition to a controversial waterfront development project backed by a consortium of wealthy investors. Lena now suspected were connected to the Krewe. Leading the ceremony was a figure even more imposing than the others stood a tall, gaunt man wearing a particularly elaborate raven skull mask, adorned with feathers and silver filigree. He held a ceremonial dagger, its blade gleaming in the torchlight. This was the Raven Master. His voice, amplified by some unseen means, boomed across the courtyard. The time has come to restore balance, to reclaim what is rightfully ours. Mobile has strayed from the path of prosperity, blinded by progress and corrupted by outsiders. Tonight we shall awaken the Weaver, and she will bestow upon us the power to reshape this city in our image. The chanting intensified. The Raven Master raised the dagger, and Lena's stomach lurched. This wasn't just about power, it was about control, about reshaping Mobile into a playground for a select few, at any cost. As the Raven Master brought the dagger down, preparing to sacrifice Penhaligon, Lena acted. She burst through a side door, camera raised, and began snapping pictures, the flash momentarily disrupting the ritual. "Stop," she yelled, her voice echoing across the courtyard. "What are you doing? This is insane." The chanting stopped. All eyes turned towards her. The Raven Master slowly lowered the dagger, his masked face tilting slightly. "Well, well," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. A curious observer, or perhaps an unwelcome interruption. The masked figures surged towards her, surrounding her in a tight circle. Lena stood her ground, her heart pounding, but prepared to fight. "Who are you?" she demanded. The Raven Master stepped forward, his presence radiating power and authority. He removed his mask, revealing a face that was both handsome and cruel. It was Alistair Beaumont, Serene, a prominent businessman, the heir to the Beaumont family fortune, and a seemingly respected member of Mobile society. "I am the steward of this city's destiny, Ms. Moreau," he said, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "And you, it seems, have stumbled upon something you shouldn't have." "You're kidnapping people and performing rituals?" Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Beaumont chuckled. "We are merely ensuring the continued prosperity of Mobile, Ms. Moreau, removing obstacles, realigning forces. Mr. Penhaligon was a thorn in our side, obstructing a project that would benefit this city immensely. A project that would line your pockets." Lena countered. "A project that would create jobs, stimulate the economy, revitalize our waterfront," Beaumont said, his voice hardening. "You wouldn't understand. You're a journalist. You see only the surface. You don't grasp the larger picture. The larger picture involves sacrificing innocent people to a mythical entity." Lena challenged. Beaumont's eyes glinted with fanaticism. "The Night Weaver is not a myth, Ms. Moreau. She is a force of nature, a primordial power that has been waiting to be awakened with her guidance. We can build a new Mobile, a city of wealth, influence, and eternal prosperity." He gestured to his followers. "Seize her." Two masked figures grabbed Lena, pinning her arms behind her back. She struggled, kicking and thrashing, but they were too strong. "You won't get away with this." She spat. "On the contrary, Ms. Moreau," Beaumont said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We already have." He turned back to the altar, raising his hands in the air. "Continue the ritual." The chanting resumed, more fervent than before. The green flames of the candles grew taller, illuminating the courtyard with an eerie glow. The air crackled with energy. Lena fought against her captors, desperately trying to break free. She managed to land a kick to one of their shins, causing him to stumble back. But the other one held her firm. Beaumont ignored her struggles. His attention focused on the altar. He began chanting in the guttural language, his voice resonating with power. The runes on the altar began to glow brighter, pulsing with an otherworldly light. As the chanting reached a crescendo, the ground began to tremble. A vortex of energy swirled above the altar, growing larger and more intense. Lena felt a surge of fear unlike anything she'd ever experienced. A low, guttural growl echoed through the courtyard, and a shadowy form began to materialize within the vortex. It was amorphous at first, a swirling mass of darkness, but slowly, gradually, it began to take shape. Long, clawed fingers reached out from the darkness, followed by a pair of glowing red eyes. A grotesque skeletal face emerged, its features contorted in a silent scream. The Night Weaver was awakening. The air tasted like ozone and decay, thick with the monstrous presence coalescing above the altar. The Night Weaver wasn't fully formed, but the sheer weight of its power threatened to crush the very air from Lena's lungs. Beaumont, eyes blazing with fanaticism, seemed oblivious to the danger, lost in the ecstasy of the summoning. Lena knew she had one chance. One desperate gamble. She remembered Evangeline's notes. Frutine reference to a disruption frequency, a specific harmonic resonance that could potentially destabilize the ritual. Evangeline hadn't known exactly how to induce it, but she'd speculated that a sudden discordant sound, tuning a deliberate break in the rhythmic chanting, might be enough to disrupt the flow of energy. Taking a deep breath, Lena began to shout. Not words, but a chaotic jumble of sounds, a deliberately jarring cacophony, designed to shatter the hypnotic rhythm. She screamed, she yelled. She mimicked the chanting in a distorted, mocking tone. Her outburst caught the crew off guard. The chanting faltered, then broke completely. Beaumont spun around, his face contorted with rage. The vortex of energy above the altar flickered, its intensity visibly diminished. The half-formed weaver recoiled, its shadowy tendrils retracting. Silence her. Beaumont roared. Lena's captors tightened their grip, but the disruption had created an opening. She twisted, wrenched free of their grasp, and scrambled towards Arthur Penhaligon, who was still bound to the altar. Hang on, she yelled, fumbling with the ropes. Who are you? Penhaligon stammered, his eyes wide with fear. No time to explain. I'm getting you out of here. She managed to untie the ropes, freeing Penhaligon just as two more masked figures descended upon them. Run, Lena shouted, shoving Penhaligon towards the crumbling manor. Head for the trees, I'll cover you. Penhaligon, dazed and unsteady, stumbled off into the darkness. Lena turned to face her pursuers, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. She wasn't a fighter, but desperation lent her a surprising strength. She kicked out at the nearest attacker, connecting with his shin, then grabbed a fallen torch, wielding it like a weapon. The plantation grounds erupted into chaos. Masked figures chased after Penhaligon, while others converged on Lena. She darted between the decaying columns, using the environment to her advantage. She tripped one attacker with a strategically placed vine, then used the torch to ward off another, forcing him to retreat with a yelp. But she was outnumbered, outmatched. She felt a sharp pain in her side as one of them landed a blow. She stumbled, nearly falling. The adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins began to ebb, replaced by a wave of exhaustion. And then it started a familiar, insidious craving, not for alcohol exactly, but for the numbing oblivion it provided. The stress, the fear, the bone. Deep exhaustion were triggering a desperate need to shut it all out. She clenched her jaw, fighting to maintain control. Not now. Not here. She ducked behind a collapsed stone wall. Catching her breath, she could hear the frantic shouts of the pursuers closing in on Penhaligon. She had to find a way to create a diversion. As she scouted her surroundings, she noticed an old, overgrown greenhouse, its glass panes shattered and caked with dirt. An idea sparked in her mind. She grabbed a handful of loose stones and began pelting the greenhouse, creating a series of loud crashes. The distraction worked. Several of the attackers turned towards the greenhouse, giving Lena the opportunity she needed to regroup and press forward. She ran towards the edge of the plantation, hoping to reach the road and signal for help. Just as she reached the tree line, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Paulus, freeze, Detective Miles Corbin. The skeptical detective she'd cautiously befriended during her investigation. The one who'd initially dismissed her concerns, but had gradually started to listen. He strode onto the plantation grounds, gun drawn, followed by two uniformed officers. Moreau, he said. his voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "What the hell is going on here?" "They're conducting a ritual," Lena yelled, pointing towards the manor. "They're trying to summon something." Corbin's expression was still skeptical, but he saw the fear in Lena's eyes, the desperation in her voice, and he saw the masked figures swarming around the plantation, the burning torches, the unmistakable chaos. "Secure the perimeter," he barked at his officers. "Let's move." The arrival of the police shifted the balance of power. The crew members, realizing their ritual had been compromised, began to scatter. Beaumont, however, stood his ground, his face a mask of fury. Lena, despite her exhaustion, helped Corbin and his officers round up the remaining crew members. The scene was surreal, masked figures being handcuffed, ancient symbols bathed in the flashing lights of police cruisers, the lingering scent of incense and fear. But Beaumont was gone. Lena saw him disappear into the dense swamp bordering the plantation, melting into the darkness. He was clutching something in his hand, something small and ornate. "Where did he go?" Lena asked, her voice hoarse. "He headed into the bayou," Corbin said, shaking his head. "We're sending out a search party, but it'll be difficult to track him in that terrain." "What was he holding?" Corbin frowned. "I don't know, something metallic. Small, looks like a locket." Lena's blood ran cold. A locket. Evangeline's notes had mentioned a locket, an heirloom, said to contain a fragment of the Night Weaver's power, needed to fully complete the summoning. Beaumont had escaped with the key to completing the ritual, and he was out there, somewhere in the dark, treacherous bayou, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Weaver wasn't fully dispelled. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. The bayou breathed around them, a humid, suffocating embrace of cypress knees and Spanish moss. The air hung heavy with the scent of mud, salt water, and something ancient, something unsettling. Lena, squeezed into the bow of Old Man Tiber's flat bottom boat, shivered despite the heat. "He knows these waters like the back of his hand," Detective Corbin said, his voice tight with determination. He stood beside Tiber, scanning the shoreline with a pair of binoculars. "Beaumont won't get far," Tiber, a grizzled fisherman with eyes that had seen too much, grunted. "Beaumont ain't afraid of the bayou. His family's been hiding in these parts for generations. They say they got more tunnels and secret places out here than a gopher has holes." Lena clutched a photograph of the locket Beaumont had been carrying, a close-up taken from Evangeline's research. Old Man Tiber peered at it, his face creasing in thought. "That ain't a locket, child," he said finally. "That is a serpent's tooth, carved from some kind of dark stone. Old Creole magic. My grandmother used to tell stories about it. Said it belonged to the first Raven Master. The serpent's tooth. Evangeline's notes had mentioned it, describing it as a focal point for the summoning, a conduit for the Night Weaver's power. It wasn't just an artifact. It was the key to unlocking the entity's full potential. "Where would Beaumont take it?" Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tiber pointed towards a cluster of dilapidated shrimping shacks, barely visible through the tangle of mangrove trees. Old Man Hemlock's place. Been abandoned for years, used to be a popular spot for smugglers and other types. Hidden coves, secret passages, perfect for a man with something to hide. The boat glided silently through the murky water, the only sound the rhythmic splash of Tiber's paddle. As they approached the shacks, Lena felt a familiar surge of anxiety. The cravings, momentarily subdued during the adrenaline-fueled chase, were returning with a vengeance. She focused on her breathing, reminding herself of the strength she'd found in sobriety. "You can do this. You have to." They found Beaumont inside the largest shack, surrounded by 4 remaining crew loyalists. The shack was dimly lit by flickering lanterns, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. In the center of the room, Beaumont was performing a makeshift ritual, using the serpent's tooth to channel energy into a crude, hand-drawn symbol on the floor. "It is over, Beaumont," Corbin shouted, raising his weapon. "Drop the artifact and surrender." Beaumont didn't respond. He simply continued chanting, his eyes closed, his face contorted in a manic grin. "He is trying to complete the summoning," Lena realized, her voice tight. "We have to stop him." A chaotic gunfight erupted. Corbin and his officers exchanged fire with the crew loyalists, the shack reverberating with the sound of gunfire. Lena, remembering a self-defense class she'd taken during rehab, dove for cover. narrowly avoiding a stray bullet. She crawled towards Beaumont, inching closer with each passing second. She noticed the symbol he was chanting over a complex arrangement of interlocking lines and circles. Identical to one she'd seen in Evangeline's research, it was a binding sigil designed to anchor the Night Weaver to the mortal plane. "The sigil," Lena yelled to Corbin. "Destroy the sigil," Corbin, amidst the chaos, fired a precise shot, shattering a lantern that hung directly above the symbol. The flames ignited the wooden floor, quickly engulfing the sigil in a fiery blaze. Beaumont screamed in rage, abandoning the ritual and lunging at Lena. The serpent's tooth clutched in his hand. He swung at her, but she dodged the blow, grabbing his wrist and twisting it forcefully. "It is over, Beaumont," she said, her voice filled with unwavering resolve. "Your reign of terror is over." Beaumont struggled against her grip, his eyes burning with fanaticism. "You don't understand? This is bigger than you. The Weaver will grant us power beyond your wildest dreams." "It will grant you destruction," Lena countered. "Your obsession will be the end of you." She remembered something from Evangeline's notes, a counter-ritual, a specific incantation designed to disrupt the serpent's tooth and sever its connection to the Night Weaver. The words were archaic, obscure, but she'd memorized them, clinging to them as a last resort. Closing her eyes, she began to chant, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the noise of the gunfire. She spoke the ancient words, feeling a surge of energy coursing through her veins. The serpent's tooth began to glow, pulsating with a dark, malevolent light. Beaumont screamed, clutching the artifact tighter. But Lena continued to chant, her voice growing louder, more insistent. The serpent's tooth began to crack, fissures appearing on its surface. Then, with a final ear-splitting shriek, it shattered into 1,000 pieces. A wave of energy erupted from the fragments, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging the shack into darkness. A guttural roar echoed through the bayou, followed by an eerie silence. The summoning had been broken. The Night Weaver's connection to the mortal plane had been severed. Corbin and his officers quickly apprehended the remaining Krewe loyalists. Beaumont, defeated and broken, slumped to the floor, his eyes vacant and empty. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the bayou, Lena sat on the deck of Tiber's boat, exhausted but exhilarated. She watched as the police led Beaumont away, his empire of darkness finally crumbling around him. 22 weeks later, Lena sat at her desk at the 20 Mobile Register staring at the completed article, Shadows over Mobile, Unmasking the Krewe of the Black Dawn. It was her masterpiece, 70, a meticulously researched, unflinchingly honest account of the Krewe's history, their rituals, and their ultimate downfall. Harold Boggs, to her surprise, had given her free rein, even offering a grudging compliment. The article was generating national attention. Offers were pouring in from other news organizations. Her career was back on track. She leaned back in her chair, a sense of profound relief washing over her. She had faced her demons, confronted her past mistakes, and emerged victorious. She had saved Evangeline DuBois. Though the young woman was still recovering from her ordeal in a private care facility, she had brought down a dangerous cult. She had earned her redemption. Suddenly, her computer pinged, signaling a new email. The sender was unknown. The subject line was a single word, awakening. She clicked on the email, her heart pounding. The message contained a single cryptic sentence: "The Weaver sleeps, but her roots run deeper than you know." Lena stared at the screen, a cold dread creeping into her soul. The Krewe of the Black Dawn might be broken, but their influence, their darkness might still linger beneath the surface, waiting for another opportunity to rise. And she, Lena Moreau, the reporter who dared to uncover the truth, might have unwittingly awakened something far more sinister than she could ever imagine.